Hey guys, Prowl1701 here, and today we're going to be looking at some classic Doctor Who stories, and this is part 2 of a 6-video series where I will be ranking all of classic Doctor Who, or most of classic Doctor Who, from worst to best. In part 1, we talked about number 158 through 131. Today we'll be going from 131 to 101. And at number 130 on the list, we have The Wheel in Space. Now, I just saw The Wheel in Space for the first time recently, and again, it's the only time I've seen it. Excuse me. It's okay. I think it's a little better than its reputation. It does drag a little bit. 2/3 of it being missing doesn't help. The recon for it that exists, the loose cannon recon, is fine. It's definitely better than some of them out there, although some of the footage being reused over and over does get a little tedious to me. Sometimes I'd just rather have pictures. Some of the CGI stuff they do for some shots is really welcome and nice. The 2 surviving episodes I enjoyed. I did like the 2 surviving episodes, episode 3 and episode 6. I love the fact that the final episode survives. That's a big deal with me. I love when a final episode survives and I can just kind of end the story on that. That was really nice here with everything coming to a head. The actual story does kind of plot along. Troughton's not even in the second episode. The Doctor's unconscious because he hits his head. It's just kind of there. It never really clicked. It was fine. It's not bad by any means. Again, it's better than its reputation. But I can see why it's considered the weakest Cybermen story of the 60s. The weakest Cybermen story in what I consider to be the best decade of Cybermen stories. I definitely see that. And I do like the animated cut down of part 1 we had with the Macroterra. I do like that. I actually hope they animate Wheel in Space. I think I might have a better appreciation of it, especially if they could do it on the level of that animation short, which I suspect they can't. Next on the list is Nightmare of Eden. The updated effects really help this one. I do like the updated effects a lot, although I thought the original lasers looked pretty good. But the updated effects really help. The actual story is fine. Again, nothing to write home about, but fine. The costumes for the Mandrills are okay. I agree with people that it would have been a little better if maybe they'd been kept in shadow. Maybe the rooms hadn't been so overlit. But I actually find the outfits for them fine. The politics about, drugs and the danger of drugs is fine and interesting to see in a Doctor Who. And the fact that creatures become the drugs, that's a pretty neat little twist. The acting is usually okay. The guy doing the odd German accent, it's kind of rough. And then I thought the resolution of the story was fine. The sets are okay. Nothing to write home about, but they're okay. I do like this resolution of the story, but again, it's just kind of, it's fine. I do think Nightmare of Eden's better than its reputation, but I don't think it's this underrated gem some people think it is either. I think it's just, it's okay. It's Tom Baker's The Wheel in Space. Next on the list is Frontios. Frontios is... There are things I like about Frontios. There are things I don't like about Frontios. The Tractators don't really do much for me in concept or in design. But they're the weakest thing about the story for me, though. But I love Davison's performance in this. It's one of his best. I love some of these shots look really good. Like there's this one scene of the ship and stuff happening in the background. I can't quite remember right off, but I love that shot. I talked about it a lot in the actual review for that. I loved that shot. The TARDIS being seemingly destroyed with just the hat rack left, that's pretty cool. How they find the TARDIS in bits later is pretty cool. Everything going on with Turlough is a little odd at first. Like I was like, what's going on here? But then when you find out why he's acting like that, that's pretty cool. Some of the guest cast are putting in good performances as well. And how the Tractators can just take you from the ground like that's pretty cool too. The Tractators themselves are kind of the weakest part of the story. If it wasn't for them, or if they'd been realized a little better, I think the story would be a little higher, honestly. Next on the list is the Faceless Ones. The animation helps here. It's not perfect. I do wish the animation of the Faceless Ones themselves, the changelings, when they're in their real form, were a little more faceless, like the original look. Like we've seen pictures of them where they don't have a face. I like that better. I don't like how in the animation they still kind of have a face. That's a nitpick though. I love the fact that the animation tries to match their surviving episodes where it needs to at the beginning of the story, when they're in spots that they're also in the surviving episodes. The fact they do try to match that, and they don't really try going bigger than what the original production could have done until the end of the story when they go to different locations that aren't in the surviving episodes. I love that balance, and I accept that balance. Like when they go to the aliens ship, the fact they draw that is bigger than better. I accept that. That works for me. I love the 2 surviving episodes. I wish more of them did survive. I think they're really good. And Ben and Polly get a decent send-off. I mean, it kind of sucks they're only in like the first 2 episodes. But at least they do get a proper goodbye, and the reason they want to leave makes sense because they're pretty much the day after when they originally left. So it makes sense and works. Yeah, I like this one. It doesn't blow me away, but I like it. Rewatches really help it for me. Rewatches have helped me appreciate it more. And it is one I do enjoy going back and rewatching. And I like watching the black and white version and the color version. I think they're both good. And that's more than I can say for some of them. And next on the list is Full Circle. Full Circle is one I'm a little kinder toward, always fresh off a rewatch. When it's fresh on my mind, I seem to appreciate it more. As is, it's another one that falls into fine. I like Tom's performance in it. I actually like Adric well enough in it. Most of the cast are fine in it, I think. I like the guy the original guy who's the record holder who dies early on. I liked him. And then the guy who takes over his role, which I swear to God looks like the second in command from the War Games. The guy with the glasses who's always saying the War Lord. That looks like the same actor. I don't know if that's the case, but it looks like the same actor to me. He's good. I don't like the bit about Lala being mind controlled by the creature, because I just hate when companions get mind controlled or hypnotized. It just happens a little too much. And especially her being a Time Lord, I feel like she shouldn't be as susceptible to that, so it kind of irks me when that happens. I do love the Doctor figuring out that they're repairing the ship and taking it apart at the same time because nobody knows how to fly it. I do like that. I still don't quite get how the life cycle thing there works, but that's really weird, to be honest. Full Circle's fine. Next on the list is Terror of the Vervoids. I enjoy this one well enough. I mean, the plant design has some unfortunate ideas in it that once you see you can't unsee, but it's fine. It's fine. The actual story I like well enough of plants running around killing people, with its thorns, and the guest cast are fine. The one guy with a mustache who's kind of like a security guard, I like the actor playing him. I do like the female scientist. I know she's a famous actress. She's fine. Her death is incredibly stupid, but she's good playing the part. I like Colin in it. I like how he stops them and how they wilt. That's really cool design on how the costumes wilt, how they turn brown and die like leaves. That's pretty cool, actually. The scene when the Doctor finds the one assistant who's infected and is like half turned into a Vervoid, that's chilling stuff, and really well done. I especially enjoy the trial-less version of this a lot, so you can watch it as a standalone episode. It's my preferred way of watching it, to be honest. The updated effects are okay. They're a bit negligible. I just much prefer the fact there's a trial-less version of it to watch. Yeah, it's nice. It's just, that's most I can say about it. It's nice and enjoyable. Next on the list is Fury from the Deep, and that's probably higher than some of you thought I would place it. But I love the story. The story is S tier. I absolutely love the story. I really should just listen to the audio of it sometime. And I find the Recon a fun watch, despite being 6 episodes of Recon. The biggest problem and why it doesn't rank any higher is that animation, which just drives me nuts. It's my second least favorite after the Web 3 animation. Easily the worst 2D animation. And I get part of it's just because they were in a crunch and they were rushed. And they had to cut corners where they could. But those are so obvious that it hurts the production, the final production. And I don't really care for that stylized choice either, even though I'm far more accepting of it in something like Abominable Snowman. What I really can't forgive is how they widened rooms and made it bigger and made a lot of the areas bigger, which takes away from the claustrophobic nature of the story. It's like the people doing the animation had an extreme lack of understanding of the story itself, which is an odd thing to think about Gary Russell, who I know loves Doctor Who. But it just seems like they didn't get the story, because it's supposed to be atmospheric, tense, claustrophobic, and you kind of lose that with the animation, and that's why it ranks this low, despite loving the story. And next on the list is The Crusade. Now, The Crusade would be higher if it was complete, because I love the surviving episodes. They're really good, and I really wish that final episode existed, because again, you guys know Prowl loves when the final episode exists, like the Wheel in Space. But the recons are fine, although episode 4 you really need the subtitles on to tell you what's going on, because the first time I tried to watch it, I was getting confused. So I had to go out, turn the subtitles back on, the little linking things to tell me what was going on, which made it easier to get through. Especially episode 4. I love episode 4. I just wish it existed. This story would be so much higher if episode 4 at least existed. But the surviving episodes are good, and the recons are fine. Yeah, it's a good story. I can't rank it higher when that episode 4 recon's a little trickier to get through without the subtitles. But what exists of it is phenomenally good. Gene Marsh and Julian Glover are putting in fantastic performances. Very enjoyable story. And next on the list is The 10th Planet. Yes, the first story with the Cybermen, and of course the story to feature the first regeneration. I really like the first half. The first 2 episodes are really solid. The second half kind of loses me, though it's not really the people making the story's fault. You have, of course, Hartnell being out for episode 3 due to ill health. It's not handled well in the script, in my opinion, but they didn't really have much of a choice because it was such short notice. And then episode 4, of course, being animation. And I love Planet 55's animation, but for some reason it's very jarring going from the live action to the animation. But it wasn't as much in the last watch through as I had found it before. It seemed like it clicked a little better. But it's still a little disappointing when you want to actually see that final episode in full, with the full regeneration and everything. I love the Cybermen design. It's one of their best designs. It's definitely their creepiest design. I love the Cyberman voice. Much better than the voice they use in most of the 60s. And I love their plan. I mean, they're defeated a little too easily. It's a little odd that Mondas just disintegrates, but I like it. Also, the guy playing the general is really good. And you have a black person as an astronaut in a story that came out in 1966. I think that's very progressive. I like that. And the actor playing him does a good job. The guest cast do a pretty good job here. I also really like the scientist that gets more to do in episode 3, the one with the glasses. I really liked him a lot too. So I really enjoyed the guest cast in this quite a bit. It's just, I don't know, I feel like it's a little overrated because it is the first Cybermen story, the first regeneration, Hartnell's last story, etc., etc., etc. I feel like that gives it a little more weight than it actually deserves, honestly. So it just kind of falls here for me. Good first half, bit of a letdown with the second half. And next on the list is The Seeds of Death. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the Troughton Ice Warrior stories. They're fine, but they don't do much for me. This one, I think, also would have made a better 4-parter, much like with the Ice Warriors. It's not very memorable to me. I think I've watched it twice, and a lot of it doesn't stick with me. It has a couple cliffhangers I like when the Doctor and the rocket trying to get up there. I like the idea of the transmat beam or whatever it's called. It's basically the transporter. I like some of the guest cast, like the one guy who goes out fighting. I think he even manages to kill one of the Ice Warriors. He like rigs up the room to kill it with heat or something. I liked him. He goes out fighting. The actor playing the really cowardly one I like, because you feel bad for that guy. Because some people are just very much, you don't know how you're going to react until you're in that situation. The poor guy just wants to live and he's scared. And to be fair, he dies doing the right thing at the end. I enjoy the performances from our main cast. I like the guest cast. It's a very forgettable story. It's my least favorite of the Ice Warrior stories, period. As much as I love the Troughton and the Troughton era, I much prefer the Peladon stories, which we haven't reached yet, and the modern Who Ice Warrior stories, which are my favorite Ice Warrior stories. So this one's okay, but it's very, very much not very memorable. What I often call the Terminus syndrome, although Terminus is higher up on the list. Next on the list is the Claws of Axon, which is our first Pertwee story on the list, which is a testament to how good the Pertwee era is, when even what I consider to be the weakest story on the list is still easily watchable and enjoyable. I don't dislike this story. It's average or maybe a little below average. It's fine. It's CD tier for me, one or the other. While I'm not overly enthusiastic about this one, and it does have elements I don't like the inside of the Axon ship does nothing for me. The Axon's designs when they're disguised does nothing for me. Other stuff I like when they're in their real form, which of course was later reused for the Crinoids. I like the Master in this. I like this is the first time we see the Master really having to work on the fly instead of having time to have a plan thought out, and how that changes the dynamic in Delgado's performance. I love that. And I like the FBI guy who's investigating the Master, trying to capture him. I like him a lot. And then the fight scene between him and his doppelganger is done really well, especially considering, they don't have the computer technology for them to face map, and make it look like there's two of them there. So they were having to use just clever camera angles and choreography. They do a really good job with that scene. But again, I find the story a bit forgettable and uninteresting. So it just kind of falls here. But I think it's pretty neat we've made it this far in. On the second video, we had to get to the second video before we reached the lowest of the Pertwee era. That's pretty strong recommend of the Pertwee era. Next on the list is the War Machines. Now, I've only watched this one once, and I liked it well enough. I do find the actual War Machines look a bit silly. They kind of remind me of the cleaning robots from the Happiness Patrol. They look a bit silly. It's hard to take them seriously. Dodo's exit is also terrible. But I love the introduction of Ben and Polly. Their only complete story, I believe. They're both very good in it. Hartnell puts in a really good performance here. I like Wotan and how it's taking people over. Is the War Machine 6 parts? I don't even remember. I think it's 6 parts. If it's 6 parts, it feels a little overly long. A couple really good cliffhangers, especially that one. But again, just a little forgettable for me. I probably need to give it a rewatch. That is the one I've been mentioning at the end of videos I want to get a copy of. There's really 2 episodes I want to get right now, and that's The Reign of Terror, which I love. I've seen a couple times and I love, and The War Machines, because I really do want to give it a rewatch. Next on the list is Planet of the Daleks. Back with Pertwee again. And again, this one isn't bad, and it's got Bernard in it, and I always love when Bernard shows up in classic Doctor Who. I know a lot of people say it's kind of a rehash of the Daleks, but if that's true, it's a better version of it. I like the set design a lot. I like the Thals. It's nice to see the Thals back. Modern Who seems to forget the Thals even existed. The plans don't really go anywhere, though. A lot of it doesn't make sense. You have the Daleks trying to learn to become invisible, which is a great cliffhanger for episode 1 if we didn't have the fact that it's called Planet of the Daleks. I love these episodes in Classic Who where they have Daleks right in the title, but the episode 1 cliffhanger is Daleks! The reason the cliffhanger for episode 1 of Earthshock works is because you're not expecting Cybermen. But it's hard to be surprised with, oh my lord, there's Daleks, when it's got Daleks right in the title. And that happens numerous times. It's still a great cliffhanger. But then they abandon the invisibility thing. Then you have the creatures that live there who are supposed to be invisible but are already in the coats anyway, which I guess saves on budget. And then partway through, you switch to this plan to poison everybody. I get very uninterested in this one. Although the color restoration for episode 3 looks really good on the Blu-ray and the DVD. Personally, I think it looks better on the DVD release. But it looks good on both. Minor quibbles aside. It's fine. It's not a Pertwee story I like to go back to very often, though. Although, if I'm going to watch Frontier in Space, I'm going to watch Planet of the Daleks since they go together. And next on the list is An Unearthly Child, the Doctor Who story that started it all. Now, episode 1 is top tier Doctor Who. The first episode, if I was ranking it by itself, would be considerably higher. It's a phenomenal episode that does a really good job of introducing you to the concepts of the show, like peeling back layers on an onion. It really is a mystery episode. Now, most of us as viewers, we don't get the full impact of that, because most people watching An Unearthly Child are coming into it already knowing about Doctor Who and what it is. It's very unlikely this is going to be your first encounter with Doctor Who. You're coming back to it from another point in the show. But trying to set all of that aside and look at it from the point of view of this is the first encounter you have with the show. It really is a mystery being peeled back by layers, and that's actually quite fascinating. Episode 1 does that well. Now, the other 3 episodes have become a little more standard fare for what we see in a lot of Doctor Who, especially early Doctor Who. But they're fine. Now, I don't think they're bad like some people do. But I think they're fine. I enjoyed them well enough. The stuff with the cavemen, it's fine. It's just, a bit average. It has kind of the same thing the Space Museum has. Really, really amazing first episode, and then the rest of it's fine. That's kind of what we have here with An Unearthly Child, and then because of that, this is just kind of where it falls. Next on the list, we have Vengeance on Varos. And I'm actually very surprised it's this low, because this was for the longest time my favorite Colin story, even though I hadn't seen them all at the time. And it's often heralded as his best, but for some reason, my last watch through of it, it didn't quite click with me like it normally does. First, the stuff with Perry turning into the bird doesn't work at all. It's got things I like. Syl is fantastic. I love Syl. The guy playing the governor is really good. The cliffhanger for episode 1, and again, or part 1, I guess it would be, because again, this season only has the 2-parters and 45-minute segments. The cliffhanger for part 1 is fantastic. I love the holographic look of the hallway. It's a really neat effect. Colin there, like he's dead, is a neat effect in that. And cut it as the actual episode cuts out. Very good finale. I like some of the set design as well. Some of the choices don't make sense, like, is it Sean Connery's son that's in this one, as I recall? His character's useless, and his wife's character's useless. They serve no purpose. The guy who wears the Phantom of the Opera mask because he's scarred, as soon as the mask comes off, he never puts it back on. He's just like, how dare you? It's kind of weird, and that just always is weird to me. The quibbles I have with this episode really irk me the more I watch it. It does some good stuff, but those things really bug me to the point to where it kind of pulls me out of the story, and it just kind of falls here, surprising to me too. And next on the list is the colorized version of the Daleks, the movie-length edit. I enjoyed this well enough. Sometimes the upgraded music works for a scene, sometimes it doesn't. It very much changes the tone of the scenes sometimes. And it is definitely a different viewing experience. Excuse me. The colorization works really well most of the time. There's some odd purples on the Daleks sometimes that don't need to be there. And sometimes they do try to make it look kind of 60s Cushing movie-like, which is a mixed bag. But I definitely prefer this version over the original Daleks. I found it a nice watch. When I go back to it, I do still want to go back and watch the original version of the Daleks because I feel like I need to. But I have a feeling this will be my preferred version of it. I love some of the added things, like some of the added model work. some of the added laser blast effects from the Dalek guns, some of the new added dialogue from the Daleks so the voices aren't quite so stilted. I enjoy a lot of that. The fact they got one of the original Dalek voice operators, excuse me, back to do it, I love that. It's just more of an exciting watch than the original version, and it just falls here. Next on the list is The Invasion of Time, which I just rewatched recently with the season 15 box set. I finally got to see it with the updated effects. The updated effects help a lot. I don't really care much for the story, I'll be honest. The story does not do much for me at all. It's not necessarily just garbage, but it's just kind of, it's okay. Yes, edging towards okay, but it doesn't do a lot for me. The set design for Gallifrey is nice. It has a consistent look with what we've seen in Gallifrey, especially in the Tom Baker era, especially with Deadly Assassin. So that's some nice little continuity there. The guest cast are good. This is my favorite version of Barusa, actually. I really like the guy playing Barusa here, I think. The guy playing him in Five Doctors is good, too. It's really close between them, but I think the guy playing Barusa here wins it for me. Just something about the way he carries himself. I like seeing the kind of tribes that live outside of the capital city here and getting a little more knowledge about them. I really like Leela in this one. Her departure is terrible. That's part of the reasons why this ranks so low. She has a terrible companion departure, especially since it's extremely out of character specifically for Leela. I don't really like that at all. The effects are very obviously rough on the original version because the budget's gone. I mean, the budget just really hinders this episode so much. It's just so obvious that the inflation had hit and the budget was out. Oddly enough, the TARDIS scenes didn't bother me on my latest rewatch. The interior of the TARDIS looking the way it does, usually that's always been a thorn in my side like most people's. But considering it's the fourth Doctor, it doesn't. Maybe part of it's because I love the location filming. Because I love film. I love the look of film. I love when Doctor Who shot location on film. That just looks really good a lot, especially with when they have the film elements. Now, they didn't scan the film elements for HD for the box set, but back when they did the DVD, they scanned the film elements in standard, and they did use those masters for the Blu-ray release on the box set. And so they still look really, really good. So I enjoy those segments because they just look good to me, better than the studio look to me. Maybe that's part of it. But again, it fits the fourth Doctor's personality, so I can be a little more forgiving of it because of that. The updated effects help, especially the updated effects with the Vardens. That is a huge improvement. They updated the laser effects, and you know how Prowl likes his updated laser effects. That helps a lot, and the laser effects are very consistent with the laser effects in Arc of Infinity, so I like that continuity there. And the Sontaran laser effects, they just make the actual fights in the story look better. It gives it these little quality of life improvements that that really do a lot for me. They really do a lot for me and just make the story a little easier to swallow. It kind of falls here where with the original effects it would have been, I think, a little lower. Not a lot lower, but a little lower. I think this is a good spot for it. And next on the list is The Mutants, which is a little higher than I think a lot of people would have it. And I've only watched it the one time, but I did like my first watch through, I think, more than its reputation, perhaps. Of course, part of what drove it for me, like other stories that I've only seen once, was the constant wondering of what was going to happen next, where the story was going. I remember being toward the end of part 4, knowing it was a 6-parter, and it seemed like it was about to wrap up. I'm like, I'm curious. It seems like we're at an ending point. How are they going to extend this with 2 more episodes? And then they did. I enjoyed that. I really like the guy who's like the leader of the base, kind of the main antagonist of the story with the little thing he talks into. That guy's great. I absolutely really like him. And then the kind of main guest star, that's the good guy, the one that kind of turns into the butterfly thing. He's good. I like him. I also like the other 2 guards, Cotton, and I forget the other one's name. I really like both of them as well. I think they're doing fine. And then I enjoy the story. I think the creatures look good. The insect creatures, I think the costumes look good. I like it. I enjoy the story. I like how it all ties together about metamorphosis. I like the social commentary on class systems, and it's an interesting allegory to race relations. I think that's done really well. Classic Who was really good at doing politics very subtly. I mean, like, you obviously knew what they were doing. Although as a small child, it might go over your head. But as an adult, you knew what they were doing, but they didn't hit you over the hammer with it like Modern Who sometimes does. Not always, but sometimes does, especially more recent Modern Who, where it just kind of applies it like a sledgehammer to your face. They were a little more subtler with it. They made it organic to the story as well. And you never got the impression that the point they were trying to make overtook priority over the story. The story always seemed to have priority, and that the political elements were just woven into it expertly, like they were here. It's actually a really fun watch. I don't know how it'll hold up on rewatch, and there are a couple of scenes where the effects look a little rough, like when the Doctor's in that one area that he's having trouble walking in to get that little crystal or whatever. That looks a little, probably looked pretty good for the time. Has not aged the best, honestly. But I'm curious to see how I feel about this one on rewatch. I don't know if it'll move up, down, or if it'll stay the same. And next on the list is Robots of Death. And I can just hear the people coming to me with the torches and the pitchforks coming at me. Robots of Death, to me, is one of the two most overrated stories in classic Doctor Who. It's good. Don't get me wrong. Robots of Death is good. But the reason I like Robots of Death is I really like its execution. I love the choices made by the production team and the director. The actual story doesn't work for me. It's kind of like the God Complex. I don't like the story, but I think the execution of the story is done very well. And that can make a big difference to me if I like what I'm looking at. And this is very much a case of that, where I love the robot designs. It could possibly be the best robot design in all of Doctor Who, especially classic Doctor Who. And I love the design of the ship, where instead of, since they're workers, I mean, they're like minor workers, but their ship doesn't have that industrial look like, say, the Nostromo, that blue-collar look to it. It has this more luxury cruiser look. Like, okay, they're having to work, but at least they're comfortable while they're working. I love that choice. The outfits they're wearing have a more, where you almost think they were wealthy instead of working. I like that. Those design choices really make it. There are a couple beats to the story I like, but for the most part, the story lets it down for me. It's great on a first watch, but for me, doesn't hold up on a rewatch. And that's why it's ranked here. The story, it's not one I ever go back to because I'm invested in the story. It's one I go back to because I love the design choices. And that's why it only ranks where it does. Next on the list is The Hand of Fear, sticking with Season 14. Season 14 is a good season, but I always find it very overrated. Easily the weakest of the Hinchcliffe era. The first 3 episodes are really good, but then I find it falls apart in episode 4 when they get to Eldrad's home planet, which isn't realized the best. And then when we get to the male Eldrad, which just isn't pulled off as effectively as the female Eldrad. I like the female Eldrad. She's done well. The male Eldrad is just very obviously Stephen Thorne. And I'm so used to Stephen Thorne's voice being Omega. Like, that's just in my DNA because I've seen the 3 Doctors so many times that when I hear him talk, all I hear is Omega. And I'm like, oh, that's the same voice actor who does Omega. It pulls me out of the story. It's not Stephen's fault. He has a very booming voice. But he always uses that same voice for parts. And it just pulls me. I have the same problem with the Daemons, honestly. It just pulls me out of the story a bit. And then the scene when he trips over the scarf is so badly done. He just kind of steps over it and falls. It's a bit of a letdown. My willing suspension of disbelief really has trouble there with that. And that really pulls it down for me. Now, I love the goodbye at the end. It kind of redeems itself with the goodbye at the end, which was improv very well by Tom and Liz. Can you really get this sense of things not being said there, which I really like. And I also have an issue with it, with it's yet again another episode where a companion gets kind of hypnotized or put under something else's influence, which had just happened to Liz in the previous story too. So that kind of hurts me. It works here, and that kind of has to happen for the story to work, but it's still a little irksome to me. It's a tropey thing I don't like I mentioned when I talked about Full Circle. But the first 3 episodes are pretty good. That's why it ranks this high, but that 4th episode just holds it back. Next on the list is Frontier in Space. I like Frontier in Space. I mean, there is a lot of them getting captured, getting free, getting captured, getting free, but I still enjoy it. It fills out its 6 parts well. It does have the rushed ending because it has to tie in with Planet of the Daleks, which I don't really care for, and I definitely wish the Master had a better ending scene, since it did ultimately end up being Roger Delgado's final scene as the Master. They couldn't have known that at the time, but I do wish it was, in retrospect, I wish it was done a little better. Delgado's putting in a great performance here, and so is Katie and John. I love the Draconians as an idea. I love their makeup. It's great seeing the Ogrons back, and I love the idea that the Earth and the Draconians being at war because the third party is manipulating what's going on. That's a really good story. I think if it was done separately and had a better ending to tie it up, this one would be higher. But since it has to sacrifice a lot of that to tie in with Planet of the Daleks, which doesn't thrill me in the first place, it just kind of holds it back a bit. And again, it does get a little repetitive. Next on the list, and probably higher than some of you thought I would have it, is The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Now, let's be clear. The first 2 episodes of this story are rubbish. Rubbish. The first 2 episodes of Greatest Show in the Galaxy, while having moments, are also rubbish. Like the scene when they almost get hit by the car because they're not paying attention to the road in front of them as they're walking down the middle of it. But the last 2 episodes pick up. The 3rd episode becoming pretty decent, and the 4th episode being really good. Kind of the opposite effect of The Hand of Fear, where it sticks the landing. And I really like a story that sticks the landing, and I really enjoy episode 4 a lot. I like the werewolf girl and the actress playing her a lot. I really like her. Listening to the MC rap is kind of funny. He doesn't rap well. The character of the professor I don't really care for either. I get why he's there, but I never really care for him. The actor playing him is fine, but I never really care for him. Knowing the behind-the-scenes stuff, and we're lucky this got made at all with them pitching the 10 up, makes me appreciate it a little more as well. I do like Sylvester McCoy in this. I do like Sophie in this a lot. I'm always a little disappointed that when the professor comes back to life, he's not a little scarred up. Like he gets killed by the werewolf, but there's not a scratch on him. That always bugs me a little. But the special effects are cool. Like when the doctor's walking away from the tent explodes. That's a really iconic, cool shot. And then the red energy rising up at the end it's a pretty good effects here in this story, which really help it. The fact it sticks the landing gets it this high when I didn't like the first half of the story at all. It's definitely higher than it would have been before my last rewatch of it when somebody had sent it, and it gave me a little more of appreciation for it than I had before. Next on the list is Enemy of the World. This is another one that's overrated. It's unfortunate. I'm glad we have it. I'm glad it was found. Troughton is putting in some good performances. Really, if you think about it, he's putting in 4 performances. And the little nuances between, say, Salamander and the Doctor pretending to be Salamander are just a testament to what a phenomenally good actor he was. The actual story is okay. It doesn't really grab me, but it's okay. I love the chef in episode 3. I want an entire spinoff series about the chef in episode 3. Big Finish, get on that. I love that guy. I wish he was in more of the story. And the interesting plan of Salamander using like volcanic eruptions to do stuff is a pretty neat idea. The reason this one isn't any higher is I never want to go back and rewatch it. I just don't. I think I've watched it twice, and it's never one of those stories I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to give Enemy of the World a rewatch. That's one of those. I'm like, I haven't watched Enemy of the World in a while. Yeah, I can keep that streak going for a bit. as much as I love the Troughton era, I don't ever really have the desire to go back to this one. I don't really know why. I just never really have. I never really have a want to go back to it. So it just kind of falls here. It's a shame because there's so few complete Troughton stories. I hate to be like that. But I would trade Enemy of the World any day for Evil of the Daleks or Power of the Daleks or the Moon Base. Because those are just more interesting stories to me. Next on the list is The Deadly Assassin, and we're with Season 14 again. The Deadly Assassin is the other classic Doctor Who story I find to be the most overrated story in classic Doctor Who. They're both from Season 14. Season 14 I like. It is just overrated. Deadly Assassin I like. I don't think it's a bad story. I think it's fine. In a bubble, just watching it on its own, it's actually really good. My problems with Deadly Assassin when I start thinking about what it does to the lore as a whole. It's the story to me that just ruins the Time Lords. They've never recovered. They go from being these godlike beings that can do so many different things to being squabbling humans, politicians, complaining about their hip being sore. They've never recovered from that. Even to this day, they've never recovered from that. And as much as I love Bob Holmes, I hate that Deadly Assassin does that. That it brings the Time Lords down kind of to our level. Plus it introduces the god-awful outfits, the seldom worn robes, and by seldom worn they mean you will see them every freaking time from now on, and I dislike those outfits. I wouldn't mind the outfits if they were just worn for important ceremonies, like you kind of get the impression was supposed to be what happened. But the fact we see them all the time annoys me. I don't like those outfits. Tom is great in this. It's always good to have Bernard back. It's an interesting take on the Master, and was it Peter Pratt? Is that his name? He's putting in a good performance. The set design is okay. It's not blowing me away, but it's okay. The story doesn't really do much for me, to be honest. It's not bad by any means. Like I said, in a bubble on its own, I like the story. It's nice to see the Doctor have a solo story where he doesn't have a companion. The only time that happens in Classic Who. That's actually quite fascinating. And Tom, he sells it on his own pretty well. This isn't one I like to go back to a lot, to be honest. It used to be, but now that I really look at it in context of the lore as a whole, I don't go back to it very often. Next on the list is the Monster of Peladon. I enjoy the Peladon stories. One, I just tend to love the Third Doctor era. I love Sarah Jane in this. She's a huge benefit to this story for me. I think Sarah Jane is written better here than almost any other story she's in. That's one of the reasons this is placed so high. I love what it does with her character. She seems very independent here, which I love. The way she's dressed with that jacket and the way she does her hair. It strikes you as this very independent woman who's not going to put up with crap. And I like that. And I like the fact that that happens in this story. Well, were you going to get an apology for, and he's just dragging her away? The actress playing the new queen is good. It's got the engineer, that's the shady character who's also in the Space Pirates. I like him a lot. Seeing the Ice Warriors back as the villains could seem like a step back. But at least it does mention in the story that they're a rogue faction. So I like the fact the story does acknowledge that that's a step back and give an explanation for why they're evil in this story. And is it a little long at 6 parts? Yes. Are the miners' hairstyles ridiculous? Yes. But I still find it an enjoyable watch, if a little too long at 6 parts. Next on the list is the Curse of Peladon. I tend to think of these really close together, so I wasn't surprised they landed next to each other. I like the fact that it's only 4 parts. That seems a little better suited towards this. I do love the atmosphere of the story. It has a really nice feel to it. David Troughton is really good as the king here. What's going on between him and Joe feels very organic and very well done. I like that. And I just enjoy the story. I feel like it just does this story a little better than Monster of Peladon, and I think it works better as a 4-parter. Next on the list is the Sea Devils. I like the Sea Devils. It's fun. It does... I feel like at 6 parts it goes on a little too long. It could have been maybe a part shorter. I love the Sea Devil design, by the way. I love the use of the Master in this. I love the mention that they were friends a long time ago, the Doctor and the Master. I love that that's put in there. I love the sword fight between Delgado and John Pertwee. I just had to imagine they had fun with that. I don't think Roger had fun with that, though. I bet he didn't. I think he was a nervous fellow. But it's a really cool fight scene. I love the fact the Master gets away at the end. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I really like the actor playing the guy who runs the prison. Even though he gets kind of manipulated into helping the Master, I like that he goes out kind of honorably. I think he even takes out one of the Sea Devils doing it. I liked the actor playing him a lot. I love the fact they actually got the Royal Navy involved and helped support what was going on. That was pretty cool. They actually had a hovercraft they got to use. That was really neat. It's a fun story to watch. One of the most iconic uses of the sonic screwdriver in the Third Doctor era, setting off the mines. That's pretty cool. It's just not one I go back to, even though I've seen it multiple times. It's just not one that I want to go back to as much as I do some other stories in the Pertwee era. That's why it's not ranked any higher. Next on the list is Logopolis, Tom Baker's final story. I find this one a little disappointing, especially since it's Tom Baker's final story. I feel like if this wasn't his regeneration story, I might be a little more forgiving. And to be fair, he does kind of go out saving most of the universe. I like the initial shots of Anthony Ainley where you don't really get a good view of him in like basically the first 2 parts or so. That's well done. Although his performance and the rest of the story is fine. I feel like Tom's putting in a good final performance. I like how it brings Nyssa back. I wish it had done more with Nyssa meeting her, the Master and her father's dead body, but that kind of happens at the end of the story anyway. The stuff with the Watcher is a little confusing, I'll be honest. The whole idea of Logopolis as a whole is kind of silly to me. Mathematics holding the universe together. A little silly to me. It's still an okay watch. I don't mind it. I don't dislike the story. It's okay. But that's all I can really say about it. It's just okay. Tom Baker deserves better for his final story. Next on the list, higher than most would have it, is Time and the Ronnie. Yeah, I have Time and the Ronnie higher than stuff like Hand of Fear, Robots of Death, and Deadly Assassin. The comments are going to be interesting, the comment section. Oh yes. Time and the Ronnie, I think one of the reasons I'm a little softer on it is I know all the behind-the-scenes drama going on with it. The fact it was written for Colin, the fact it was originally supposed to be in the forest, the fact that the director and the writers were never happy with the end result. But the story itself is fine. I can enjoy it well enough. McCoy is leaning more into his comedic talents here. That's fair. And I will admit, a lot of people think all of season 24 or all of the McCoy era at times is Time and the Ronnie, and that's certainly not the case. Sylvester McCoy suffers from the same problem Colin Baker did, where everybody seems to associate, well, not everybody, but people who don't know any better tend to associate their eras with their first story, which is not the case. In either case, it's just not the case. Sylvester McCoy is a comedic actor, so he's well fitted for what he's doing here. I like how he's mixing up his metaphors and sayings here. I find that funny. And it does lean into some of his comedic talents, like the spoons. When he's playing the spoons on Kate O'Mara's that's hilarious to me. Kate O'Mara looks like she's having a ball, which she was. If you listen to her talk in interviews, she loved it. She had fun. And you can tell she looks like she's having a good time. That sells me on it. Some of the special effects look really good, like the little balls that spin and fly in the mountains. That's a pretty neat looking effect for Classic Who. The opening shot, while it hasn't aged the best, is probably pretty impressive for 1987, I think. The regeneration is a little unfortunate, but it doesn't bother me like it does some people because, again, they didn't have Colin. What are they going to do? And 2, I understand that in canon, he's mid-regeneration when he's turned over. So it makes sense that he doesn't quite look like Colin, because when they roll him over, he's already mid-regeneration. So he's like halfway through it when he's flipped over. So it works for me. I don't mind it. And plus, I like the little glowing effect on the face. Yes, I prefer the updated effect from the DVD, and that's the one I traditionally watch now. But the original effect was fine. It had me convinced when I originally saw the story as a child. And maybe that's another reason this one's so high, is I do remember watching it when I was little in the late 80s, early 90s. So I do have an affinity for it there. The Tetraps outfits look really good. The monsters, I like it. The fact that with the multiple eyes, I can't remember if any of them blink or not. The tongue, the mouth moves. I think it's realized pretty well, actually. And then the makeup on the other aliens, which kind of reminds me of the Draconians. I think that's a pretty sharp little outfit. And is this another one with Wanda in it? I feel like Wanda's in this one. She's in like 3 of them. I can't remember if it was Faceless Ones. I know she's in Image of the Findal, and I think she's in this one as well, as I recall. Yeah, I like Time in the Ronnie. Is it perfect? No. Is it a masterpiece? No. But I definitely think it's better, especially when you know all the behind-the-scenes stuff going on. I think it turned out way better than people give it credit for, and probably better than it had any right to. And the last one we're going to talk about today, The Underwater Menace. Now, my first time watching The Underwater Menace was when the animation came out. I've only watched the black and white animation with the surviving footage. I haven't watched the color animation because I don't understand why I would watch a color animation when half of the episode exists. I don't see the point in watching a fully animated story when half of it exists. But going off the black and white animation with the surviving episodes, I liked it. I think part of it was I knew going in, it's not exactly Genesis of the Daleks or Caves of Androzani or Inferno. That it's not a well-regarded story, that it's not meant to be taken too seriously. So I approached it more with the Horns of Naimon approach, and I liked it. It was fun. I liked Troughton's performance. I love the scene when he's in disguise. The guy playing Zeroff is delightfully over the top. I feel like the animation doesn't get him quite right, but the surviving footage of him is perfect, which I love. I thought the scenery looked good. The fish people I thought were fine for what it was. The redesign and the original version, I don't mind either way with that. I thought it was a fun, silly little story that you don't take too seriously. I liked the animation a lot. I thought the animation actually matched up with the surviving footage pretty well. I mean, they do make artistic choices, but maybe because I'm watching it in black and white, they didn't bother me. I didn't have problems adjusting from going animation, live action, animation, even though there are some changes between the two. For some reason, I didn't find it jarring at all like I do some of the animations like Galaxy 4. And that made me really appreciate it and really enjoy it. So I think going into this one, already knowing it wasn't a masterpiece really, really helped. And I just found it a fun watch, honestly. So that's where we are with kind of the bottom part out of the way. I've lost my train of thought there. So I want to know what you think of part 2. Comment down below and let me know. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that. There's a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Finn, Perkins, and Colin Coney. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It is much appreciated. I have a link to my Patreon, link to my Patreons down there, I said that. I have a link to my Amazon wish list down there. I have a link to my Amazon UK wish list down there, which I've added some stuff to recently that I wouldn't mind getting. My P.O. box is down there if there's anything you'd like to send directly for me to look at and review. And YouTube memberships are also available. So if you disagree with any of my choices, like putting Time in the Ronnie above Robots of Death, feel free to let me know about it. And most importantly, thank you for watching.